Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Network. It's time for In a Nutshell for October. And I'll tell you what, it's a special occasion. I'll even turn on the background lights. Why not? I have my trusty old Westeros mug that I got from my trip, Game of Thrones tour in Ireland. This thing is heavy. Works also as a self-defense item, I would believe. But we're here to talk about everything that I read in October. And if this is your first time joining a live wrap-up, essentially what it is, me talking about everything I read, there will be timestamps after I go off air in the description. So if you're watching this after the fact, you'll actually be able to skip to just the book talk. If you don't want necessarily to sit through the chat interactions or a little bit of the freestyle chatting at the end, where I'm going to talk about some things that hopefully I get to read in the month of November. Feel like November's already kind of booked up and there's going to be a lot of books being read. And the thumbnail for this video asks the daring question, did I read too much or do I read too much? I think it's did is on the thumbnail. And I got to tell you, the reason why I asked this is because I found myself, I'm a compulsive reader already, but this month it felt way more like that. And I just kept starting things. And you might say to yourself, well, Jimmy, you said last month that you were going to start doing one book. And if it didn't grab your attention, that you would just DNF it and move on. Well, I lied to you and I lied to myself, because it turns out that I am just a serial book starter and I cannot seem to get away from starting more and more books all the time. Which, let's be fair, it could be drugs. That's what I always just say to myself. At least it's not drugs. That's a good thing, right? There have been so many things that I have started that will probably all get finished up in November. But for me, before I jump into the books I read, there's going to be 6 books on this list. There probably could have been a 7th, but I finished it like in November technically, so I'm just going to leave it be. But 6 books. When I start getting to 4, 4 is usually the number of books I read in a month. When I get into 5 and 6, I'm always like, wait, am I doing too much? Like, am I reading too fast? And that actually is the case for one of the books that I came out a little bit more mixed on for this month. Which I will talk about probably 3rd or 4th probably tonight. And I don't know. I try to keep myself honest. I try to say, hey, are you just reading or are you reading? Are you really taking it in? And the truth of the matter is I think I did actually do a great job of truly reading the books and getting something out of them. These are definitely some of my favorite books that I'm going to talk about this year. Not favorite reads, but favorite books to talk about. 2 different things. I have a lot to say about some of these books. And then one that 2 books technically I can't say much about, but I'm going to try to dance around spoilers as best as I can so you don't have to worry about that. It's wonderful seeing you all in the chat for our 2nd ever live In a Nutshell video. I mean, the usual suspects are here. We got Tom Orange, now famous from being on Chatting with Nuts Flex Off competition, in which we did, which we dubbed Fourth Wing the Kegel of the fantasy genre, which I thought was pretty excellent. And then also there's Jared, Daniel, Bees Knees, Derry, of course, y'all, all of you are here, and I appreciate it so much. And I know that on a Friday night, we're used to maybe seeing Chatting with Nuts. We're used to seeing a more conversational type thing, but I will be interacting with the chat as I go through, as I kind of talk about the books that I read. I felt like I could have done this last night. It was Halloween. I was a little worried about possibly too many trick-or-treaters knocking on the door, and I'm glad I did, because that's exactly what happened. So I'm glad to be doing this here tonight. And don't forget, after I wrap up all the books, we're going to be doing the Patreon pick of the month live. So whatever gets picked will be picked. Will Nemos win his 3rd pick in 4 months? Who knows? He said if he wins, he actually will pass it to somebody else. He said, for the love of God, just pick somebody else. He's getting hate mail constantly. But it's wonderful to see you all. And I'm very, very excited to talk about this first book in a nutshell, because it's one that actually won the Patreon pick last month from Nemos. And it is High Rise by J.G. Ballard. This is certainly one of the classics of the sci-fi genre. I think it was written about 1975, I think, somewhere around there. But this is an author that I feel like is a blind spot for me as I try to read more and more sci-fi and get what better read in that genre. Gregory Sadler, our good friend here, Dr. Gregory Sadler, he actually recommended this book to me last time I had him, I think on Chatting with Nuts or when we did a Philip K. Dick talk. And I was pumped that this came up on the Patreon pick. And why I love the Patreon pick is because High Rise wasn't anywhere near the top of my TBR. But now I can say that I have read it. And I came out, as you can see above me, positive on this book. And It's a positive experience because I think I took it for what it is, which is just like, hey, here's the situation. Let's see what happens. And from what I've read, that does seem to be J.G. Ballard's MO. He likes taking human beings and sticking them in very weird positions, generally closed spaces or like too many people in one area type deals, and then watch the human psyche unfold or unravel in this case, because High Rise is the worst of humanity. And I mean, obviously, it's a comment on high-rise buildings, everything being concrete, stuffing us in these little squares and boxes on every block, which is something that is probably really interesting to think about, because it only seems to be happening more and more and more. I mean, standalone houses are evaporating across the United States as well. Everything is connected, everything's duplicate, whatever it might be. So, I mean, it's, to my point is, this is probably a inspection or a critique that we could probably still look at, but there's a little bit more than that going on here. And I wanted to read the opening line or two of this book because I think that it has one of the best hooks that I've ever read. So you'll know immediately that this is a messed up world. So this is the opening line of High Rise. Later, as he sat on his balcony eating the dog, Dr. Robert Lang reflected on the unusual events that had taken place within this huge apartment building during the previous 3 months. So this man is eating dinner on his balcony in this high-rise building, and it is in fact, a dog. First off, very sad. Secondly, why? What is happening? What a good hook. And J.G. Ballard then goes sicko mode, for lack of a better term, and just goes in on this premise. And yes, it is definitely brutal. It definitely tackles classism, but it's also talking about individualism, I think, and the downsides of extreme individualism and how we look at each other whenever we're looking out for number one and number one only. Classism, like I said, is here, and people in this building, it's a hierarchy, right? Like the bottom is the bottom class, the middle is the middle class, top is like the people who help like construct the building and know the owners and all this stuff. And that's pretty on the nose, as we can imagine. But one of the things that I took away from it is that the people in the middle or anywhere in the building seem to be more tolerant of those above them making noise than the ones below them making noise. Now, obviously, this starts out as subtle disruptions and issues, and then it goes into full scale, dystopia, whatever. Like, it's horrible. It's destruction, right? Like a total meltdown of the society that's within this building. So that is something that is very compelling to me, though, is the idea that, oh, my neighbors upstairs, those are the higher class people. They probably have a reason they're making this noise, but the people beneath me, how dare they? And it's like almost that they want there to be more space between them and the next rung down. And unfortunately, I think that that's probably still pretty accurate for individuals, and maybe not everybody. I'm not saying all of you. All you are wonderful people, of course. But I don't know. It kind of rang true, and it affected me in a pretty big way. The main character, Lang, was actually shocked that people in the high rise talk so bad about people in the low level as if they were like not part of the building, or they were like migrant workers or something like this. And I think it just shows that like when you put people in a space or some sort of structured building or area, that they will always find a way of making a hierarchy no matter what they can, like what it is. They don't care. Like it could go from the job that they have, the hair color, the eye, it's something will always end up putting somebody below somebody else because we almost like thrive for that. Maybe this doesn't all ring true, by the way, but this is something J.G. Ballard is certainly going at in this book. And it almost feels in some ways that the building is like a living thing. Like the building is almost a character in itself because of this. And throughout the entire thing, you will see these people fight among one another, but they never fight the people who own the building. They never fight the people who constructed the buildings and put them, honestly, in this mess, into the decaying structures of the building. The building is decaying the entire time. Elevators not working, breakdowns, leaks, whatever. And it all starts at the bottom, and it only gets noticed once it gets to the top. So you kind of see where this is going. And while I did like this, I am positive on this book, and I think if that sounds interesting to you, that you should check it out. I do wish that maybe there had been a little bit more around the characters and a little bit more setup instead of just being thrown into the situation, everything just unraveling at 1,000 miles an hour. But that's also not what this book is. It's to make you look at this through a very unfiltered lens and make its point. And it does. And I honestly, maybe there isn't a point. Maybe it's just saying, hey, here is an absolute archaic situation. Let's see what happens, shall we? And that is what it feels like. This tower and this book feels almost oppressive, like physically oppressive. And I felt like there was a distinct lack of humor in the characters and in the story. So like, I don't think you'll find that if that's what you're looking for here. There's not a lot of balancing act. There's not much of a balancing act when it comes to the tone. So J.G. Ballard High Rise. I mean, I've tackled a J.G. Ballard book, and I'm happy to say I will definitely read more of J.G. Ballard. I think he has some pretty cool ideas. This is the ideas genre, right? So I would like to see more of J.G. Ballard. I've heard some people say that this is one of his best. I've also seen some people say this is one of his worst. So I don't know what the general consensus is, but I enjoyed it, and I'm positive on it for what it was. It's not going to win Book of the Year or anything, but good time, good experience. Happy it won the Patreon pick. And now let's turn to the chat. I have plenty of people in here, so we'll go through this, and I'll see what's relevant as people jump in and jump out and have conversations among themselves. Snitch says, "You're losing the crowd, Jimbo. Zoomer's ADD kicking in. Start shining some lights or something." I don't think that's going to happen here, which is upsetting. Zealy Green says, "Just read and enjoy, Jimmy. It doesn't matter how many. That's a dumb YouTube myth." It's more so just me being like, how many slides do I have to make? Like, I don't want to read more than 6 books. I have to make slides for every book. If I read 10 books, I got to make 10 slides. It's a lot. I'm just kidding. Oh, man. I have not read Crash, Daniel. Is that by J.G. Ballard? I think it is. I'm pretty sure that I've actually seen that. Also, Putrid Sunrise says, "Banger opening line." Yeah, I think that this is probably one of the better opening lines that I have actually read. At least this year, I can say that with certainty. Sunset says, "Obsessing about the number of books you read is not a useful way to expend mental energy. If it felt good, it was good." Yeah, and guys, I'm kind of just joking. Like I'm being kind of tongue in cheek. I do reflect on how I'm reading though, because I don't read for numbers. I'm not a big numbers guy. I don't really talk about how many books I read in a year or anything like that. But this month, it just felt like I was reading to like the detriment of other hobbies at times, at least toward until the end of the month. The end of the month, I had plenty of distractions away from book. So, Tyson, there is a film off of High Rise. You asked if there was a film off this book, and there is. I have not watched it, and I don't know if I will. Unless if people say it's just absolutely amazing, I would think about it. Tom says, "I've wanted to read Drowned World by him for a while." Yeah, I've heard that one's pretty good. And it looks like Crash is by J.G. Ballard, by the way. Laura A. Blake says, which is Fantasy Wash. Are you changing your YouTube name? I don't like that, eating the dog. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm a huge fan of it at all, but it is what it is. Noelle says, "The way Jimmy uses such Gen Z slang cracks me up." Which one was that? I hang around a lot of different people, so it varies from time to time. So yeah, I mean, that line to me had me hooked. I kind of wanted to know, and I really did enjoy High Rise for what it was. I thought it was pretty fun indeed. Jared said, "Hierarchies. Jimmy has entered his Jordan Peterson era. If so, the channel will be deleted tomorrow." And Laura says it's kind of like the Stanford Prison Experiment. That popped into my head as I was reading this book, actually. I would have to like revisit the Stanford Prison Experiment to like really make a comparison while this is still in my brain, but it is something that at least crossed my mind to think of comparison to. So it says, "It's funny that you say there's a lack of humor, because I think it's funny. Not laugh out loud, certainly, but it's clearly not meant to be taken 100% seriously." So what I guess what I kind of felt was that there was no humor for the characters in the building. Like, I think it's even mentioned in the book, like they don't laugh. There's no jokes in the building. Like the people of this place do not have humor. There is a distinct lack of it in the book as far as like the in-world goes. But I mean, it is almost so over the top, like Evil Dead. I would kind of make that comparison, I guess, to where like you probably could chuckle because you're just like shaking your head, like, what in the world is going on? Why are these people so terrible? So that's fair. That's fair. Dylan says, and this is being reiterated throughout the chat, that Crash is one of the weirdest books ever. You guys know how to get me. You guys know how to get me to read something. You know I like weird, and we're gonna have a really weird book later that I can't wait to talk about. And by the way, if y'all don't mind, by over 100 of you here, hit the like button. It really helps. Thanks. Easy says, love the new direction the channel is going with the all live streams. Thank you. It is Aslan. Sorry, it looks like an I in my software. It is not conducive to growth, but it is conducive to me having fun and doing what I do best. So it's going to be really, really fun in the next coming months, and probably also different types of live streams as well. But stay tuned. Just stay tuned. Tyson says, I always assumed the world outside the high-rise building he's talking about was apocalyptic, but I guess that's not the case. I felt like it was maybe like a futuristic, like capitalistic dystopia or something, but I'm kind of extrapolating like my own details. I think it could be kind of whatever. And I also don't know if that's necessarily the point. Like we should probably question about like, how do we get to something like this? But I also don't know if it's as deep as that. So I would definitely consider this to be in that kind of like, I don't know, like an urban dystopia of this big cement building being so oppressive, possibly. So it's kind of interesting. But I want to talk about another book. And by the way, I don't have a second camera angle because I'm ironing out the second camera angle. I had the second camera angle. I didn't love how it was, so it's under construction for right now. So you're going to have to stare at me through one lens tonight. But we're going to talk about Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. The E is for extra. Not really. Okay, so Octavia Butler obviously is someone that I have immense amount of respect for. She's an award-winning author for multiple books, and Kindred last year just absolutely cleaned up at the end of the year-end awards, the Nutties, as we call them here on the channel, and that's for good reason. I think she's an absolute titan of the sci-fi genre, or we'll say sci-fi, fantasy, doesn't really matter. I just feel so motivated to read everything Octavia Butler has written because I enjoy the way she writes so very much. So I was excited to get the Parable of the Sower. I'm a huge fan of post-apocalyptic, right? Someone said ironing camera is not a technique I've used, but you do you. I like that, Doug. That very good. Very good. So I think that this book is pretty much made for me, right? Parable of the Sower is a post-apocalyptic dystopia book. I love post-apocalyptic. I've been reading a lot of it this year, still leaning into it. And the beginning of this book had me absolutely hooked, but it has massive shoes to fill from Kindred, which, like I said, won a ton of awards from me last year, but also is, I think, one of the more important books that I've read. And I don't claim books to be important all that often. I think I might have talked about an important book last time. But Kindred is one of the few that I claim to be an important book, at least at the very least important to me. So Parable of the Sower starts out, and I think I even said this on chatting one of the live streams. I said, man, if Parable of the Sower keeps going, we're talking like top 3 books this year. And the reason why I felt that way is because the tone of this book, and more importantly, the strong perspective of this book through a teenage girl in the apocalypse just captivated me. And I have this desire to read more and more books from a first-person perspective with strong voices. It's something that I genuinely do enjoy, and it seems to be the books that I'm gravitating towards more and more and more. And I love the way the dystopia was set up. I've seen some people criticize like the realism of like the situation that's unfolded. I don't care about any of that. Like the realism of it, I do not care. I could not care less. I am way more interested in the themes of the story and then also how people handle being in a situation like this. So I'm sure there's critiques for that. You can go to somebody else for those. That's not going to be what I'm going to do. But it captures the idea of things crumbling around you. And we have this character who is trying to figure out what to believe in. And the book has a strong religious theme in it. And we go into what is called Earthseed, which provides the epigraphs and almost like verses that are written. And this teenage girl has developed this religion where change is God, or God is change. And while it's never super deep throughout the story, I did find some of it to be interesting. I did as people would say, ruminate on the idea of change being God and how one would be able to handle that or understand it. And I think it's nebulous enough to where it is kind of an attribute of some sort of like deity that isn't like what we have in organized religion so much today. So I thought that was pretty interesting, and I was enjoying the strong perspective. However, this book in the second half turns out to kind of be a little bit of a quest. Okay, we start moving. The characters are moving, and for me personally, I understand the purpose of this because you have someone who has created a religion or a philosophy or whatever, and after you have created this thing, then you need to apply it in the world in which you live, in the reality that you've decided that you live in. And she goes out on this quest, and in many ways, this is the time for her to put that religion into practice. I think that there is a lot to be said about trusting the perspective of this book and also being able to see when there are contradictions, because there are. The things that the character believes at the beginning of this book that they could never, ever do, they end up doing some of those things. And at the core of this is this idea that the main character has this hyper empathy, where they can actually feel the pain that is inflicted on others. So if she were to see me punch someone in the face, she actually could feel that pain. And then there's this big question of, well, does that count for animals when animals feel pain? And there's this magnificent world of this hyper empathy that we could like explore, right? Unfortunately, in this book, the quest part I thought would maybe go more into that, and it never went into it enough. And I felt like it became kind of an afterthought in some parts of the book. Like I was really invested in that idea, and it just didn't do enough with it, in my opinion. Now, there is a book 2 of this. This is a series. This is a book 1. I believe the series was never finished because Octavia Butler passed away. So obviously it is a book 1, right? But I am definitely not as big of a fan of the second part of her kind of applying this religion. I think that it makes sense for her to do that, but I enjoyed everything within the town that she was in first, and I was so into it. I mean, like 5 stars, like easy, right? But I ended up coming out just positive because of the second half of the book that just didn't grip me as much, the quest portion of it. And I was bothered by one of the relationships. It's like a young girl and an older male. I wish I had a better idea why it was included, because I think Octavia Butler puts things in her books very purposefully, and I could not figure out the purpose of it, of what we were getting to. Maybe it's just the dire times that they're in and just like connecting with anyone that you possibly can. Maybe that was it. But that was a little bit off-putting to me. And also it's a very strong religious theme throughout the book, that we're better off with this religion that she wants to spread than no religion. Which I think is more of a perspective thing for the most part. But I found myself kind of debating with the character quite a bit throughout the book. So here's the thing. Parable of the Sower, a great post-apocalyptic fiction. I really enjoyed it. I liked the first half way more than the second half. By the second half, I was kind of ready for the book to be over. It did not reach the same level of Kindred. Kindred, to me, is a book that I don't have much to say about in the way of wanting more or being negative or anything. Whereas this book, I left wanting a little bit more. And maybe the expectations coming from Kindred of being a book that was so important to me and important in general, maybe it was impossible for it to fill those shoes. But I did like Parable of the Sower. I enjoyed it. I will read Parable of Talents. It's split on whether people like it or not. I've heard that there's more pushback on this religion that's kind of described as, a force of good in the first book. And there's a little bit more pushback on this because I do believe that the main character has faults. And as I was reading it, I was questioning them, and I was finding those faults. So it made it for it to be in a very engaging read. And the entire time I was reading this, I was engaged with it and asking questions and thinking about it and wanting to think things through of why it was included in the story. And for the most part, I got out of it everything that I put in thought-wise, maybe minus the odd relationship that was in the book. So this is a book that I am positive on. I wouldn't say that I'm overwhelmingly positive or even very positive on it, but I'm positive. And I will read Parable of Talents for sure. And I still plan to read all of Octavia Butler, but I do not expect Parable of the Sower to clean up the nutty year-end awards like Kindred did last year, because Kindred did some serious damage to the award show last year. And I read it later in the year too. So it was kind of a dark, it was completely out of nowhere. So Noel says, I second live streams. My husband is so weirded out at the beginning of the Orange Brothers stream where you and Tom were talking about wrestling. He was like, no, my wife doesn't like sports. That's funny. Yeah. He has nothing to worry about. We have the ironing cameras joke, which was very funny, and I really enjoyed it. I know that there's some fans in here. I know Evie's here. She was only Evie said, Kindred, the only book I fully and with my chest say should be required reading by everyone. I mean, I at least think it's up for discussion, right? I mean, I can say that for myself. Absolutely. Neetha wants to know when I will be reading Parable of Talents. I would say early next year. That's kind of my goal. I want to read it while this book is still fresh in my mind. And it's also not terribly long, which is great. Evie says, Parable of the Sower is my favorite book of the year so far, and Parable of Talents further solidified the series as an all-time favorite. That's excellent. So you actually like Sower more than Talents. I've seen many people be split on whether they like Talents more or not. I know that Talents is a little bit more where people say, oh man, this book kind of can predict the future. And I know Octavia Butler has some essays about this. I actually intended to read them, but I get a little exhausted by the discourse of this book going back and forth because I read it with other people. And it was kind of like a mixed bag, right? That some people loved it, some people didn't like it at all. And by the time I was done with that, I was like, I kind of just want to take a break from it and go elsewhere. I do want to shout out reading with Rebecca and say it was wonderful buddy reading this with her, but she also has a review for this. So if you would like to hear more of a critical review of Parable of the Sower, she actually posted that review because she definitely liked it significantly less than I did, even though I think we agreed on a lot of the points about the books. I think we just came away with a different experience, which is kind of the beauty of reading with someone else, right? Which is pretty great. Evie says, as an aside, not going to lie, I'm not used to seeing Jimmy without the Mark's mustache. Groucho Mark's mustache, which is very, very interesting. Laura says, you're selling me with the religion stuff. So just to be clear, this is a teenager who's developed a religion that thinks that it is the answer to all things, and it has like its own like almost like proverbs and verses and stuff, which is interesting. One of the problems that people have with the book is that they felt like it was represented as wholly good, and that was problematic for some people. For me, I was questioning it the entire time, and I didn't need the text to specifically tell me any of the cons. I do think if the book had those in the first book, I think in the second book it's there, but in the first book, had there been some kind of conversation around it from another perspective, I think the book probably would have been better for it, but it's not there. So what can I do? And it also never occurred to me that I should be like, this is absolutely, the religion for me. But some people read it and they do think that. I think Change is God is like a really, in some ways it's a deeper statement, but also it can be a shallow statement. It just like depends on where you go with it, right? I think change being inevitable is like kind of an interesting idea of like this internal force, that things will always change no matter whether you like it or not. And the more you resist against it, the more it's probably going to change anyways. Like that there is some merit to that idea, I think. I personally don't subscribe to any religion. So this is coming from someone who's not religious at all. I think maybe other people who aren't religious could maybe be annoyed by the religious themes in this book, possibly. Though I'm not positive on that. Who knows? AS says Butler is a master at making you debate with her characters. It's like her whole thing and why I love her so much. Can't wait for your reactions of Xenogenesis by her. Hey, absolutely. That's kind of what I got. I mean, I found myself losing arguments against Dana and Kindred because I'm like, stab this dude in the neck. And instead, there is a huge lesson in empathy that we get from Dana, which is why she's one of my favorite protagonists of all time. Maybe my favorite even, to be honest with you. Eamon Ilu says, I thought of Earthseed as an anti-religion, more of a philosophy. She makes this plain in Talents. Yeah, I mean, anyone that's like trying to get followers of a thing, though, we get into charismatic leaders. Like it could get messy very fast, I think. Aslan, I think a first good book to get into Butler is Kindred, especially if you are from America. 100%. Jared said Talents is better in my opinion, but it was emotionally difficult read. I've heard that it is far darker. And I do want to say, and I kind of put it in my points here, along with the dystopia, this is a very grim book. I don't want you to think that you're going to walk into this book and feel great. Octavia Butler has zero back down. It is 10 toes down, facing down the darkest and grimmest things that could possibly happen in a dystopia. And it's hard to read at times. And if Talents is even more grim, then good luck. Good luck is all I will say. It is rough. Anita says there is a 10-minute interview of Butler about those themes. Don't miss it. Very good to know. Very, very good to know. I would like to watch more interviews with her. I've only watched 1 or 2 so far, so I'm hoping to catch more of that. Sometimes I wait a good while until I check out interviews just to keep my experience my own, you know. Snitch, aka Mitch, says, I see no changes. Wake up in the morning and I ask myself. I'll let everyone else finish the lyric there. Dana is, in fact, the GOAT. Samwise says, when you say people can see changes as a religion, is this a reference to the Dresden Files? For some, it could be, Samwise. For some, it could be, man. By the way, enjoyed your latest video that I saw from you, which was really, really good. It is grim. I don't know if they eat dogs, but I know dogs die in this. So there's a lot of animal abuse, unfortunately, in these, which is not great. And Beps, thank you. This mug is 10 out of 10. It was overpriced, but it was worth it, I think. She Was Only Evie says, Jimmy, would you say that Parable of the Sower should be included in conversation about post-apocalyptic fiction and akin to The Road, The Stand, etc.? Absolutely. 100%. In fact, I think it's undersold a bit as a post-apocalyptic work. I honestly didn't really know that it was necessarily post-apocalyptic until I got closer to reading it and more people were talking about it. But yeah, for sure. Why wouldn't it be? I mean, it's by one of the most acclaimed authors, and that's exactly, in my opinion, what it is. So I'm with it. I'm sure there's someone who's going to tell me that it's completely, bunk and it's not post-apocalyptic or something. That's fine. R.Reads ebooks. Interesting name. I also like your mug as the thing. It says the price tag still on the bottom of the mug. It is. It is in fact on the bottom of the mug, and it is in euros, which makes me happy. That is tremendous. Good call out. Fantastic call out. Shout out to you. Let's get into our next book, and it's one, and I'm kind of thinking of this. Yes, that mug though. I'm so glad people are loving the mug. I forgot I had it. This next book is Into the Narrowdark by Tad Williams, and Tad, as you can see, he's spying in because he's a little nervous. You know, last time I finished out a book 2 of one of his series, I actually backed away from the series, which was Otherland, even though I thought there was a lot of good things with that. I'm getting called lame in the chat. How dare you? Into the Narrowdark. The book with so much controversy around it and not about the story at all. The controversy coming from this cover, which as you can tell is not a Michael Whalen cover. And I will bring it up every single time I talk about the series because this man, Tad, over here. Hey, what's up, dude? Tad over here has had Michael Whalen doing his covers for 4 decades. And unfortunately, it was decided that I guess it was too much of a stretch. And we got this cover here. You know, God bless this artist for having to fill those shoes. I'm sure they did not love that. I'm sure they did not love that at all. But no controversy when it comes to Into the Narrowdark as a story, as an epic fantasy, as a Tad Williams book, as an Osenard entry. And easily, for me, just me personally, a lot of fantasy books have been getting split because they're too damn big. Tad, you're guilty of this just as much as anybody, okay? But I'm telling you, this is the best outcome of a book I've seen that has been split. I thought that this book was just gas. I loved it all the way through. It didn't suffer from being a split book. It has a really big moment at the end. And Tad kind of said that he felt like it had a natural cutting point, and he was right. The ending was awesome. I'm so excited for this final book. It is the most anticipated release of the year. I can't wait to read it. Into the Narrowdark is vivid. It's lore heavy, as I've said here. We get so many tidbits about histories that have happened so long ago. We have things that are paying off from the first trilogy back way when, right? Decades now ago. Tad is still making things work. He's still connecting stuff. And Into the Narrowdark is his best paced book by far. Tad Williams has always been kind of, one of those authors that gets, hey, all right, buddy, let's go. You're using a lot of words, but we're not moving a lot of places. Okay, do we have to describe these clothes? I understand that. I get it. I've always been a big fan of it. This book, Tad just absolutely ripped. I mean, I thought that this was just gas the whole way through. And when it was done, I was kind of shocked I finished it so fast because I usually read these books over like a month. I just love Tad's writing. I like to sit with it. Not Into the Narrowdark. I flew through this book. And I'm super excited. Now, guys, this is a book 3 in a 4-book series, but it's also like book 6. Technically, it's like 8 if you count the novellas. So I can't say a lot about this book without spoiling it. It's just that I literally think this might be the best Tad book. I think it might be as good as Dragonbone Chair to Green Angel Tower, Heart of What Was Lost. He is just cooking, okay? But with Tad and with this whole thing, I was so hesitant. I've had Tad on the channel. I would consider him, a loosely a friend. We've talked and we have a lot of respect for one another. He's a great guy. I didn't want to reach out to him for the arc. So I did what any respectable person would do. And I just absolutely out of nowhere cold called DAW and was like, hey, can I have an arc? And it turns out that yes, I can. So I'm actually, and if you've watched the channel for the last 5 years, I don't get arcs. I don't apply for them. I don't want them. I feel like that's too much pressure. I don't want to have any kind of influence on whether I'd like a story or not. But with this, guys, I love Tad Williams. I love this series. I got an arc for the final book. I'm going to be getting it a little bit early, which means I can take my time with it. And some of the theories that are going on right now about finishing this series that's been going on for so long, there are theories abound online, and I don't know which ones are right. I have a couple ideas, but there were some twists in this book I could have never seen coming. And that is one of the coolest things about this book is that Tad at sometimes can be predictable. I'm a big believer that predictable does not mean bad. I think if something is predictable yet makes sense the whole way through, it can still be done in a way that's super satisfying to me and satiating. This book went against that grain for Tad. Some of the stuff was predictable, but there was also some stuff that it was like, okay. Okay. All right. I see what you're doing there, Tad. You're absolutely cooking, and I'm super impressed. I was super impressed with this book for an author that has already been impressing me for so long. So, hey, hats off to you, bro. I'm glad you're here. You didn't have to peek over the fence. I'm not saying anything bad about you. Overwhelmingly positive, and without a doubt, everybody knows it's going to get the nut button from me. Fantastic book. Absolute banger. Loved it. I'm reading this. There's a couple other people on my Discord that are reading this at the time, and I got to tell you what. Everybody loved it. And that is not in my Patreon Discord. There are a lot of different opinions, a lot of different people, a lot of different tastes. No one agrees on anything. Everyone's always arguing, except for this book. This book, for the people, 3 or 4 people that have read it, all of them. And I do mean literally all of them, which again, for my crowd is pretty good. They loved it. So let's go. Shot is hyped for this release. B said, Tad about to drop the most fire 1,000-page diss track. I mean, the man is still performing, at an age where he could probably kick back and relax, and he's still doing it. He's doing the damn thing, which is amazing. Adam says, awful cover in comparison to the rest. Hope the Broken Binding releases a more cohesive set eventually. I should have brought my Broken Binding Dragonbone Chair up. Absolutely phenomenal, and I hope they do Last King of Ostenard, because without that, I will be a very, very sad boy. Hasn't Wayland been semi-retired for a few years? Yes, but from what I understand, from what I know, that is not why this happened. I'll leave it at that. Wayland could have done this cover. That's all I'll say. But yeah, an absolute slammer. I know that it's hard to wrap up about a book that is so far into a series. Some people say it's not even worth doing it, but I disagree. I still have to tell you that it is just, amazing. And Eric is bringing up the fact that Wind and Truth will be Waylon's last cover, I believe. I think that you are most likely right, Eric, which is kind of crazy to think about Stormlight not having Waylon covers. And it makes me very, very sad. Shad, who also read this book, said it is the best Tad book. And if I tier rank the books, this would be an S tier. I was gripped the entire way through. And again, I don't ever do arcs. I like getting stuff on release day, but I was like, I have to find out what happens next, which is really cool for someone who reads all the time. And I'm not jaded, but like I am desensitized to that the gripping nature of endings and cliffhangers and whatever. Not this time. Not this time. I was all in, man. Pretty amazing. Noel says, I've never read Tad Williams. Is the main rec to start with Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn? I would say either Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, or I would also recommend Shadow March. It's a 4-book fantasy series that was a serialized story that got turned into novels. It's a little bit more modern and a little better paced. I shouldn't say better paced. It's a little faster paced. I have no problem with the pacing of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I know other people do. It's just very methodical. I also always recommend War of the Flowers, which is a Portal Fantasy standalone by him. It is very large, very thick, but it has so much charm, charisma, and personality. And I think it also highlights a lot about what I love about Tad and his imagination. So the War of the Flowers is another one. It's kind of hard to find, or at least it used to be. I don't know if it still is. I have a review for it on the channel. That's no spoiler if you want to check it out. And I have tons of Ostenard content on the channel that you can also check out. So, you know, sometimes you got to pop out. Sometimes you got to pop out and show them what's really good with it. Seeing love for Tad makes me happy. Like, even if you don't necessarily like his books, you got to love the man. What an absolute chopper. Love it. Love it. Aslan says, Faithful in the Fallen was predictable, but very enjoyable. Yeah, predictable does not mean bad. I think we get too ahead of ourselves about twists and turns, and then we end up with Attack on Titan endings, you know? Garrick says the Tad appearance fee was worth every penny. Yeah, I'm still paying him off. Still paying him off. Actually, he wanted to come back on. I think after I read the 4th book, maybe I'll send out a feeler and see if he would love to come back on. William says, good nut button. All right, that's all I needed to say. Evie said, I just noticed the Tad peeking over the frame like the neighbor from Home Improvement. I'm slow to say the least. No, you're just taking your time to get there. That's all. And yeah, I know a lot of people are asking if Tad will come back on the channel. He expressed, that he wanted to come back, especially around a book 4 release. So if he's doing the media tour, we'll have him back on and we will absolutely talk to him. And I love seeing other people love War of the Flowers. I think the book is severely underrated, to be honest. Shadow March is awesome. Yeah, I've read book 1, and I actually paused it because I decided to read Last King of Ostenard and Otherland first. But I will probably end up reading Shadow March within the next 2 years for sure. So the book was indeed cash money, as we say here at the Fantasy Network. Folks, we're about halfway through the program tonight, but I just wanted to say thanks for being here. I appreciate you guys. It's a Friday night. There's been up to almost 150 people at one point, 130-something people watching live. I know there will be thousands after that watch this, and I just want to say thanks. Thanks for giving me some of your time. It is very, very much appreciated. And the best part about being live is that I can actually have moments like these where my producer, Mrs. Nuts, brings the Dragon Bone chair. Okay, this is the Dragon Bone chair from and in fact, let me actually just go ahead and make this full screen for y'all. I want you guys to be able to see this cover. So this is the Dragon Bone chair cover from the Broken Binding. I think it is arguably my favorite cover of all time. And for Tad to have the amazing Waylon covers on top of having this, it feels right. It feels like somebody is giving him his due, and even comes with a custom Dragon Bone chair bookmark, which is pretty sweet with a little excerpt from that. And then the inner art, I'll try to show this off. Hopefully it focuses. I think the inner art is almost as amazing as the cover art. So Broken Binding, I try to be contrarian every now and then, but I got to tell you that the Dragon Bone chair, look, this is the hardcover, folks. Insane. So give us The Last King of Ostenard. And you know what, Broken Binding? I think you should do the announcement here on the Fantasy Network Live. I think, folks, if you would like to see the Broken Binding do a release for Ostenard, The Last King of Ostenard live on Chatting with Nuts, or in a nutshell, I think you guys should show some love in the chat for that. Why don't we put some W's in the chat? Come on, guys, W's in the chat. I feel like a Twitch streamer. Jason Brogan said, will there be a long wait to buy the Broken Binding release of Dragon Bone Chair? I'm not sure. I got it on the subscription. I think they hit the store after. I'm going to be honest. I don't entirely understand Broken Binding. I just know that I finally got on the list after waiting a year. And then the first ones I got were Greenbone, which was fine, is whatever. But these ones, I'm like, okay, worth every single penny. Johan says, have you listened to the audiobooks? The narration is goated. Yeah. Andrew Wilcott, is that his name? Some of my favorite audiobooks. Absolutely. And smash that like button, chat. So I love the love that I'm seeing. It's also just so fun to see people enjoying books that I enjoy. Shout out to Bees Knees. Bees Knees is reading the Dragonbone Chair and has been sending me rapid fire messages about how amazing the Dragonbone Chair is, which is really great. And Tom, great point. Grim Oak also did an edition of the Dragonbone Chair, which I thought I had up here, but I don't know where, and I don't want you guys to stare at the back of my head for too long. I don't know where it is. I have the Grim Oak version. I just don't know where it is, unfortunately. Oh, I actually see it, but I'm not going to get it. So Grim Oak also did a version, which I agree is very nice, and I will continue to buy the Grim Oak ones. But to be quite honest, I think the Broken Binding one is just an absolute slammer. It's going to be great. So Broken Binding, I try to be contrarian at times about these things that we all jump on, but I can't say enough good things about Broken Binding, except I wish, it was faster and more people could get it. That would probably be the best. But let's go to our mixed review of the month. Are we ready? I think we're ready. Our Share of Night by Mariana Enriquez. So Our Share of Night was nowhere on my TBR, but I was in my Kingsguard hangout that we do monthly, and I was told that, hey, 2 of my good friends are going to be reading this book, and then a few others jumped in, and all of a sudden we got a read-along going on, folks. We got a absolute barn burner of a read-along. We got an impromptu read-along, which there's nothing better than an impromptu buddy read, right? Right? No, because I don't think anyone else finished the damn book. I think I was like the last one to join this, and I'm the only one that finished the damn book. No, I'm not wearing pants. Someone asked if that's why I wouldn't stand up. That is correct. I realized it, and I was like, I can't get up. But Our Share of Night is such a good book. And the reason why I jumped into this impromptu buddy read with these people is mainly because Ishiguro, who is a top 3 author for me at this point, loved it and blurbed it. And he doesn't just blurb anybody. So I was like, I have to check this out. And I understand why a bunch of people dropped off. I actually get it. And what I can actually say is I think that this book is amazing in some aspects and a complete drag in others. It's horror, it's historical, and it's also translated, which I think leads to some awkwardness at some moments, but the translation does have some beautiful lines. Some of it translates to English so very well. But then there was also a little bit of awkwardness at times. But, that's going to happen with translated works, and I don't think it's the end of the world. But a paranormal horror that is being classified as like literary fiction, Ishiguro loved it. They're talking about family and ghosts, the occult, love, relationships. So you're like, what is this book, And I do think that it is like a tour de force of all of these things, but it demands the attention as you read it, but also is still entertaining in a quality horror book. Now, you might be saying, but Jimmy, you have mixed above your head, and you're saying that it didn't go perfectly well. And the reason why is because even though there's a lot to pull out of this book, there were long swaths of this book where I was just not into it. And the one part I can say for sure, and I'm going to kind of talk about how I think some of this is my fault in a second, but the one thing I do kind of stand on is I think towards the end of this book, in like the last 20%, there is an absolute just drag of a section. And I felt like this book would never end. I think it was 600 or 700 pages. This book felt all of 1,700 pages by the end. I mean, I could not believe the book was still going on. And that is not an indictment of the book to say it's objectively bad. This is just my experience with the book. I want to be very clear about this. I think that Enriquez is a pretty talented author. I know she has short works I would like to read. And I think I might read this again at some point, because the part of this that falls on me is I read this book too fast. I had a very long plane ride and to and fro a place, And I got so much reading done in the hotel room, on the flights, that I ended up finishing this book in like 4 or 5 days. And this is not a book that I should have read that quickly. I wanted to know what was going on, though, so I kept reading it, and I was into it at points. But I think this book would have been way better had I have read it a little bit slower. So I'm going to take some responsibility as the reader and say that I didn't approach this book on its terms in some manner, and I think that did actually affect my experience a lot. It is slow going, it's methodical, but I didn't have a problem with that necessarily. There were just moments where I would feel like I was supposed to be getting something out of the historical context, and I just wasn't, right? This book also struggles with, the pacing. I shouldn't say struggle. The book can be a struggle because of the pacing, because you're bouncing back and forth in time between like a 60s London and then a pro-dictator military dictatorship in Argentina. And there's a ton of historical events that actually happened that are in this book. And when you look up, some of the most horrifying aspects of Our Share of Night were real. And that is crazy, because this book, and this is where it's very unique as a horror book from my experience, is actually kind of creepy. And I was genuinely a little bit scared at one point because I was listening to, I read it physically and I was doing audio. So I went into the hotel gym and I was walking down this hallway to get to the gym. And it was like The Shining. I couldn't see where I was going, and it was like I was stuck in a rabbit hole. Didn't know which way was out and in. No idea. And I'm listening to a noise-canceling earphones, and I hear like a clang, and I'm listening to a creepy part of the book. And I like take off the earphones. I'm like, someone behind me? And I'm not gonna lie. And I never really get scared. This book did actually creep me out, and it is so graphic in some of the areas. It was actually shocking at some points. And one of those happens to be a real life thing that you can look up and see pictures of, and it is horrifying. There is a scene with the dad and the son that made my skin crawl. And this book, I told you, paranormal activity, paranormal, family, time-spanning, generational type story. But it's really about a father and a son with the mother has died, and there are some really messed up occult ties on the mom's side of the family that have affected her husband deeply, and of course is going to affect the child. And you would think, well, the dad's protecting the son, and that is true, but the dad is also taking on such a burden that he cracks at times, and he's not perfect at times, and it is very flawed and very difficult to read about. There is scenes of abuse that are very hard to get through. So this is not just like some schlock horror, which, by the way, I love, but that's not. This book is trying to do a lot. And it is kind of just this mountain of a book to tackle. And you feel that climb the whole way through. You feel that climb. But when I got to the top, I didn't feel like this. I kind of felt like this. Does that make sense? Like if you were to climb a mountain, you would want to feel that elation. And I didn't necessarily feel that. And I'm not saying it was a happy ending or any of that. No. I'm just saying when I finished the book, I was kind of just like ready to slide down the backside of the mountain and be done with it, Felt like I got to the summit and then there was another climb. And I'm like, oh my good Lord, I don't want to do this, an icy ladder to get to this little peak. And that's what it was. But man, is it also remarkable and unique in some ways? And I think it still finds like the human elements that can be explored in horror and makes you see how good horror can really be. I think anyone can relate to it. I mean, it's grief and friendship and existential crisis, which I am all about. And maybe I should have just read this one, a little bit slower. I don't know. But one thing I wanted to note, and this is going to bother a lot of readers, is the dialogue tags are super inconsistent. And I have read many authors. There's a lot of Irish authors, Cormac McCarthy, other authors that don't use dialogue tags. I don't mind that at all. But I am very much like an all or nothing person. Use them or don't. And Enriquez in the book will like have dialogue tags that have quotations and then randomly other lines that are not. And the only thing that we could kind of think of with the people I talked about this book is that possibly those were like translated, like they're supposed to be a different language and not English. Does that make sense? Like it could have been spoken in a totally different language, right? And because it's a multilingual book, you're going everywhere. You're going different people, different type of places, all these things, different languages. So maybe that was the reason. But I actually found it to be extremely, extremely distracting. And anything that breaks the fictive dream, for me, is a negative. So that's just something I should note. I know some of you absolutely refuse to read books that don't have quotation marks. Well, this one has them sometimes and not others. And it is distracting, without a doubt. So this book is a mixed book, but I do believe there's a good chance that someone's going to read this and be like, this is the best book I've ever read. So I'm not saying this book is bad by any means. I think part of it's on me. I think part of it's also possibly the fact that I was distracted by the quotations, and then I had to start doing a little bit on audio. The audio was okay, so I don't know. This is a book that I simply just feel mixed on, as I put in the title above. And I would love to hear from people who have read it and loved it. I know plenty of people who read it and didn't love it, but I'd like to hear more from people who read it and did love it. And one thing I will say is I have thought about this book quite a lot since I finished it, which always bodes well for something in my long-term memory. So that's the spooky season read, which, I was trying to avoid saying this year because I know Jared Henderson, who's a big fan of the channel, looks up to me a lot. He absolutely hates the idea of spooky season. But this was the horror book this year. And part of me wishes I would have maybe read something else, but not at the same time. I'm not sure. Our good friend Overly Average Ben actually also read it, and I think he had almost the exact same feeling as me. And Ben will be on Chatting with Nuts very soon, so we'll probably talk about it whenever he comes on there as well. Putrid Sunrise said, I read her short story collection, and I had a mixed response. Don't get the hype around the author. Is there that much hype? I only heard about her last month. I'm kind of being silly. I know she's very revered. I wonder how much of it gets lost in translation. Very, very curious. I am, in fact, cursed for Buddy Reads Kai, and it's very frustrating. I was floored when I saw Ishiguro's book. Well, it's not just Ishiguro. Alan Moore also said it was a phenomenal book, which Alan Moore, not always the most positive guy in the world. Jared said, I can't remember if I was the one get you to read Ishiguro, but I'm taking credit for your love of him and your enjoyment of this book. You are the reason why I read Remains of the Day first, not why I read him, but you said I was going to read Never Let Me Go first, and you actually told me to read Remains of the Day. And you were right. I liked Remains of the Day more, but that's a spoiler because that'll be the last book we talk about on this stream. And I want to kind of keep it under wraps until then because I have plenty to say, but also can't say anything, and I'll talk about why I can't say anything, which frustrates me. So Alan Moore hates so much stuff that I just assume I won't like anything he enjoys. That's a really interesting take on that, and is still a very useful thing to know, right? Like people we disagree with all the time. I'm always perplexed by people who refuse. Like I see people be like, oh, this person loved this book and I didn't. I can no longer trust them. I can't watch them anymore. And I'm always just curious of can't you still get value out of that thing? I mean, depending on the claims, right? Like there could be some objective tone in the voice of them claiming something that is actually not in the book, of course. But I sometimes I worry that what we're doing when we're talking about media of any form on the internet is that we're just reaffirming people in their opinions. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with feeling validated by a person, you think that you respect or have, admiration for the way they talk about things. But discourse is really healthy, and also just the way the world works. And by the way, Daniel, I'm not saying about you. I'm actually giving you as a positive example of you being like, oh, I know Alan Moore hates so much stuff that I probably won't like the stuff that he enjoys. And maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. But I still think there's a lot of value to be extrapolated from people that we don't necessarily align with. And also there's almost, not all the time, but there's almost always something you align with, right? There's always something. And then you can try to figure out why that is. That's a very fun, I find that fun, but I find people fascinating and communicating with people. Adam K, who this has been his Patreon pick forever, said, love this when I read it last year, but I get it. Yeah, and I'm not slamming this book and saying it's horrible. There were some things that obviously rubbed me the wrong way, but I also feel like this is one of those books that if you get it, I imagine you feel like everyone else is crazy. So Noel says, I must say I love this style with the way you felt at the top and the genres at the bottom with the cover on the side. Well, thank you. I'm trying to make it visually appealing. But I'm also, wanting people to be able to look up every now and then if they're going in and out and be able to kind of have context of what I'm talking about. I've gotten a lot of comments over the last 4 or 5 years of being upset that I don't do this, because this is the booktube like thing. When you talk about a book, you have to hold it right here. And I wouldn't do that and be like, I don't know what book you're talking about. Like, well, rewind. So this is the solution in a live stream, because I'm sure as hell not going to talk for 15 minutes with a book hanging off my head. My arms are tired. You know, I do work out if you haven't noticed. I don't think that bit works with me, does it? Which is super upsetting. Benjamin C says, Zan is standing outside cursing all your names, Evie mainly. Yes, my friend Zan, who I love the opinion of, definitely loves this book and had to take some lumps for people just DNFing left and right. I didn't have to and fro on the bingo card tonight. Well, I'm always trying to surprise y'all. I'm trying. Evie says, alternatively, I'm actually reading this slowly, and I'm struggling, so damn tedious. I thought at times it was definitely tedious, but Bees is saying that they're interested. So it's going to be a mixed bag. You know, I don't know if this is going to be something that the masses are really going to come to, like for the people who watch my channel. But I still think that it's worth a try if you're looking for a really like historical horror that has like real world traumas in it as well. Bep says, if Jimmy can read Game of Thrones and feel no fear, then our share of night is obviously too much for me. Bunny or the yellow wallpaper is my threshold. I am a cowardly reader. You know what? Sometimes you got to know. You just got to know. Oh, man. That's too good. Fictive dream into the vocabulary. I believe that's a John Gardner term. I might be wrong, though. Yeah, fictive dream is what we search for and escape to and participate in when we read fiction. And anything that disrupts the fictive dream is, in my opinion, a negative, right? Anything, no matter what it is. Sometimes it's our fault, too. So, Jared said, spooky season is for children. And last time I checked, you were an adult, Jimmy. Thank you, Jared. Thank you, Say. Go check out Jared's Substack where he tells everyone why they're stupid. Zealy Green says spooky season has no beginning and no end. I mean, I do love horror movies around the clock. It's interesting how much I love horror movies, but then I don't actually read a lot of horror, which is probably a problem. I should probably fix that. Putrid said Alan Moore has his own fantasy book series that had the first book just come out. I'm definitely interested in reading that. I am too. I've actually never read anything from Alan Moore. Orlando Ortiz says, it's funny seeing a YouTuber hate one book and then love another that is a direct homage to it. Yeah, that does happen. But, I don't think that, like, they don't have to love the other book, right? But it is kind of an interesting thing that they might not like the thing that inspired their favorite thing. It does happen from time to time. I mean, how many people love A Song of Ice and Fire and then come back and tell me the Dragonbone chair is too slow? Like, well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Capricious Fox says, Alan Moore hates a lot of stuff. Hardly heard about him as a person. Only know his works. He's fairly critical, I would say. I think he comes across with very decisive language when he finds problems with things. So people take him as a fairly negative dude. Beesney says, yeah, it turns out that giant mug is just full of muscle milk. That would make my stomach hurt so bad. Hayward says, Moby Dick win, Jimmy. Soon. I actually have read the first 50 pages and thought it was really good. And very funny, actually, which was kind of fun. Joanna says, sometimes I forget I'm holding a book the whole time, and then I see how ridiculous I look when editing. Yeah, you're a book holder. You're a book holder, but I think it's okay. You've been brainwashed. You've been conditioned by the corporate booktube sphere to hold the book up so that people can search it on Amazon and go buy it from Jeff Bezos. So you are part of the problem. I'm kidding. People are debating spooky season in the chat. So let's check out the next book. Oh, this is a good question. Naruto says, will you read the rest of Red Rising? Yeah, I will. When the final book is announced, I'll get all caught up and then I'll be ready for release time and join the hype train. As long as I like it, of course, because I like things about the trilogy, but when I hear other people talk about it, I'm like, damn, I wish I liked it as much as they do. And a lot of that comes from the sequels. So I'm hoping the sequels are like a clear level up. But at this point, I'm going to be honest. I'm a human being. I have heard so much about the sequels and they've been so hyped to me that I don't know if they could live up to the hype at this point. It's going to be very difficult. Same thing with Jade Legacy. You know, I came away with Jade Legacy kind of like, because it was hyped up as like better than Storm of Swords. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. You know, who knows? And I didn't find that. So, you know, that's one of the downsides of being so connected into like a social reading sphere, is that expectations become built as you wait and wait and wait for things. Not that that's a bad thing, by the way. Champion your stuff, support it, hype it, because like without you, it's never going to go anywhere. Like we are the lifeblood of pushing series. So I will absolutely be reading it. So we will see whenever the final book is. Hopefully next year. Hopefully. Anita says, have you finished Anna Karenina? Not yet. That I will most likely have to restart part 3. I think it's whenever they start talking about Russian farming. I kind of bounced off of it, but I definitely plan to check it out. Garrick says Storm of Swords wishes it could be Jade Legacy. That's crazy. That's wild, man. Future said, don't people have mixed feelings on the Red Rising sequels? I mean, it depends on where you go, right? Everyone has mixed feelings about everything. Whenever something's that popular, you're going to get so many 5 and 1 stars. So, also, Samboki, I don't think anyone here is going to come at you for Game of Thrones being your favorite series, considering that is also my favorite series. And I've defended it time and time again. But now we get into a very nerve-wracking wrap-up piece here. And that is because a great friend of mine, and enter that into your brain, put it away. And if you don't trust a single word I'm going to say, I understand, but I'm going to tell you first and foremost, because this person is a friend, does not mean that I would not be honest with them. I have far too much respect for them, and I think that they have too bright of a future to rob them of any criticisms. I've read other friends' books in the past and been critical, even in private sometimes, and that you just have to trust my integrity. And if you don't, I get it. It's a YouTube and you don't know me. But if you want to take my word for it, I'm going to be completely honest about this next book. And it's one that I was super, super nervous for, because when your friend writes a book, you just hope it doesn't suck. And this one didn't at all. Severed Echoes by Anya Dillon, who has been a good friend of mine and actually is someone that I have shown my writing to, and I've seen her on her writing journey and becoming a better author and learning and growing and changing. And I was so nervous this book would, you know, I knew it'd be competent. I wasn't worried about that, but I was also nervous because I have to be honest about these things. And Severed Echoes is a book that I thought was just thrilling. That would probably be the way I would describe it. Thrilling and gripping. I could not seem to get away from this book, and I really did love reading chapter after chapter after chapter. If you were curious about this book, it is on Amazon, and this is a self-published book. I think that with a developmental editor and a proper editing team, just to maybe expand on some things, change a couple small things, I think this book could find success, and I think that Anya Dillon should shop it around, because I thought this was so much fun. And it is a weird book. If you have ever read Library of Mount Char and you thought that this was just absolute, like, you know, you thought it was unhinged or weird, but you liked it and you liked the vibe, this gave me Library of Mount Char, but I liked it a lot more than Library of Mount Char, to be completely honest with you. In fact, I think this is more in my wheelhouse of weird. What starts off feeling like a book that was written for like romantasy TikTok, you know, would absolutely be something you would see featured in a reel or a TikTok short or whatever. It ends up becoming something where the author gains confidence and is able to go and start doing things that very few people probably have actually tried to do with a book that's in so many different genres at once. So it's unique for that aspect, and it's impressive for that aspect, because it doesn't take itself super duper serious while also still tackling some very compelling themes and using devices that I wish more people would use. There is a girl named Meg, and she gets abducted, and there's a Stockholm Syndrome plot line. Like I could sit here and tell you, and be like that, and that's kind of it. But that would be robbing it of what it goes into, because it is a book that meshes with like thriller, horror, maybe a little bit of romance in there, very, very little, but also just straight up fantasy and really awesome world building that I thought was really, really fun. Almost a little bit of American Horror Story vibes at some points. Because we're going into this hotel. There's a lot of scenes that take place in a hot tub, which is kind of the way we end up going into this other secondary world. There is a secondary world. I don't want to spoil too much of this, but I thought the hook worked. And at first, I was very concerned because I find that abduction stories with Stockholm Syndrome generally cause me to have to suspend my disbelief greatly because there's always an element of the person being captured almost becoming conditioned to be acceptant of their position. And by the way, very real. That is actually a really real thing. But even when I read it, it's hard not being in that situation and looking at it as someone who's not in the situation. It's very easy to be like, oh, that couldn't happen. The clever thing about this book is that the element that allows for this Stockholm Syndrome and almost like a receptiveness to being captured, I shouldn't say receptiveness, but maybe a bit passive at times in their captivity, is explained in a way of why it's possible in one of the coolest ways possible. And it explores the bicameral mind by Julian James, which is a nonfiction book which supposes that human consciousness actually evolved over time and the left and right side of our brains were not fully connected. And there's a whole tie-in. This is a very long nonfiction book, and there's a whole thing about it. But the bicameral mind is also one of these things where they start looking at ancient writing of Homer and the Iliad, all these things, and they're saying the gods that people thought they were seeing were actually the other part of their brain talking, and then you have this outside part of your brain. Okay, it's really, really weird. And this book is playing with this a lot. And the book it reminded me of, because of that element, and no other way is it going to remind you of this book, but is Blindsight by Peter Watts. But I actually think that what Anya Dillon was able to do is to put that crazy ass idea to work in a book that was a page turner. It didn't get bogged down too much in the details. I think some people are probably going to read this and think split personality, but they would be wrong. I don't believe that it would be a split personality. I believe this is directly inspired by the bicameral mind by Julian James. And the second half of this book, because of that, is so much cooler than the first half, even though the first half was just a blast to read. I just happened to be enjoying it quite a bit. The transition is pretty good for how staunchly different it is, because if I told you with the things that were going in the back half of this book compared to the front half of this book that starts out as an abduction thriller would be, you wouldn't believe me. You'd be like, how could someone tie this in? And as a person writing their very first book, they were able to do it. And the only thing I could think of, there's a bikini scene in this. This sounds weird. There's a bikini shopping scene. I wasn't huge on, though I understand the idea of what it was trying to illustrate, because it's a very big transition phase of the book of where Meg is kind of accepting what she's going through. I think it could have been maybe not done better even. It was more like it felt like a break for me, like a break from the story, wherever I wanted more of what was going to happen next, because you have this insane energy dependence, material dependence on this secondary world with a demon that is in our realm, and we're going bikini shopping. But that also perfectly illustrates the tone of the book, which is, yes, this book does have some crazy, awesome ideas, but it also never takes itself too seriously. It takes moments to crack a smile and crack a joke. And humor is subjective, so you might not find it funny. I found parts of this book to be very, very funny. And for me, Meg being this ditzy girl that seems like a complete airhead ends up becoming this character that you almost feel so much regret for, because she can't spend any time outside of herself. And that is something that I kind of can relate to in some ways, even though, again, ridiculous circumstance with some laugh out loud moments. But I think we all know somebody who is kind of stuck in themselves and not actually participating in the reality around them. So I think that makes Meg a really cool character. And then by the time we get to the bicameral mind pieces of the book, we see flexes of first and third person perspective that flips on itself and is just really crazy for an author to try in their first book, debut self-published book. And this is kind of what I like about self-published, is when people just go for it, just go for it. And would have I thought I would be enjoying what kind of felt like it's starting off as a abduction thriller romantasy at some point, and then turning into what I would describe as weird fiction, in lines with Clive Barker and China Miéville. No, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't have expected it, but I could not get away from this book. It had a good flow. It's cynical at moments, but it's also comically self-aware. And I think those things balance out really, really well. Maybe the tone won't work for you. There is a moment where the meme "rest in piss, you won't be missed" is used. And in any other book, I would have said that was a complete swing and a miss. But it worked so well in the moment. I'm not sure how it'll land for you. I laughed my ass off. And it felt experimental, but also written with confidence, which is so impressive from a debut author, whether it's traditionally published or self-published. So, Severed Echoes. Thank God my friend wrote a good book. Thank God. My biggest criticism to this book, other than the bikini scene that kind of took me out of it a little bit, and this, I think this book has a really great ending. There's going to be a book 2, right? Give it to me now. I would love to read it. But this ending, I think, could have used 20 to 40, 50 more pages. Could have been a little bit more ironed out, because there is an absolute crazy ass moment at the end of this book where I could not believe it happened. Like, most authors wouldn't have done this to the... I can't say anything more. There's a crazy ass moment in this book. I was like, oh my God. Like, what happens now? And I think it got resolved up a little too fast for me. I think we could have simmered on it a little bit more. We were kind of in the heat of the climax, so I understand the idea of getting in and getting out. But we needed to let it go just a bit longer. And I'm telling you, I think if we had a developmental editor get a hold of this, I think that this book has some legs, because it does have appeal to the masses. I do think the TikTok girlies would love it. The booktube boy loves it. I could see a lot of TikTokers loving it. For me personally, I would love to have seen the ending breathe just a little bit more, but the ending point was great. And I want book 2, because the epilogue piece that we get, I'm like, now what? Now how are we going to get in and out of this situation? And it does feel like it has the opportunity to get very epic at some point too. So the fantasy and the horror elements, I mean, I honestly think this is a perfect spooky season read. I think everyone should have read this in October because it has those fall vibes to me, and the horror vibes as well. So, you know what? I love when someone goes for it, and there's just this distinct turning point in the book where I could feel the confidence ramp up, and it's like, I'm going to write the book I want to write. Forget about marketing, forget about commercial viability. Let's write the book that I always knew I was going to write, because that's who I am. And for that, I think the book is better. And I'm now exiting reviewer mode. I'm just super proud of you, Amanda. I'm super proud of you. It's awesome. Literally, not every book that your friends write, not every single one can be good. And that sucks. But this one was good. And I mean that wholeheartedly. And if you feel like it's a bias, I understand. I'm not going to fault you for it. I would hope that you think better of me than that, especially given the fact that I have in the past been critical of friends' works. So I do genuinely mean that I think that this book is an absolute thrill, absolute blast. Don't take yourself too serious when you read it. Have fun with it. Read it. I think it's a page turner. I hope you like it if you try it out. And if you don't, hey, fair play. So bravo to Anya Dillon, and book 2 better come out soon, because I need to see this thing end. I need to see where it goes. And I know the writing's only going to get even better. So a self-pub success. Very nice. Very nice. So many bad takes in a row. Wow. Oh, was it the Jade Legacy thing? Oh, okay. I thought you meant this, like, damn, that's kind of insane. Neutral stories, L takes. Oh man. Oh, we have Ben talking about arcs. Says, great point about the hype trains in the community. Sometimes I wish arcs for big releases didn't exist, because I don't need to hear about how great Devils is months before I pick it up. Yeah, it's inevitable that it's going to happen. I'm going to be honest with you, y'all. I'm getting the arc for the 4th book of Osnar because I just want to know what happens. It has nothing to do with me wanting to be on a hype train or anything. Like, if you haven't read, like, we're a book like 8. Like, if you haven't read it by now, you're probably not going to read it, right? That's not true. You probably will, but like, only so many people are going to get hyped up about like a book 8. So, also, I see people saying they trust me. I do appreciate that, but I'm also saying I do understand the idea of like, oh, I know this person, so therefore I don't care about the, like, if you tuned out, I get it. I don't fault you, but all I can do is be as honest as I can. And I think Anya Dillon knows that I have enough respect that I would speak my mind no matter what. So Snitch says, rank all the books written by your friends. Your integrity as a reviewer depends on you doing so right here, right now. Also, one of the hardest judges I know has read this book and actually ended up giving it just a resounding positive review, which was shocking. So I'm just saying, I'm not the only person who was taken back by this, of just like how gripping it was. So through a hot tub, huh? Haven't seen that before. Naruto says, Sword of Kaigen in your top 5 fantasy books. No. One of my favorite self-published books, and definitely one of the best standalones, but not in my top 5 overall. No, unfortunately. So where is Scar on your list? Very high. I'd have to think about it. I don't have my top 10, but it would probably it's in the top 20 for sure. She Was Only Evie says, I love the dual narrative perspective, established and maintained intrigue and momentum. Yes, and also the fact that the first-person perspective gets a whole twist on it that is so much cooler than it had any right to be is pretty dang sweet. Samwise says, this sounds absolutely fascinating. Added it to the want-to-read list. I believe it's on Kindle Unlimited, so if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can grab it now. And I'm trying to convince Shelf Unstable here to do an audiobook for this, because it will gather many more readers or listeners if an audiobook were to come out. Dylan, apparently the bicameral mind plays a big part of Weave World. I assume this is Weave World or Wheat World. I need to rewatch that show. Westworld. I got you, Westworld. Nut button?
Nut.
Yes, in fact. I have to give it the nut button, especially for the fact of it being a debut. At some point, I just kind of forgot that I was reading a book that was written by someone I know. And that's pretty awesome. I said the same thing about Alan's narration of Way of Adan, and people agreed with me so far. It's been a resounding positive experience. Even people I know who think Alan can be high-strung and a lot like the audiobook. And they're saying they forgot. So I think that that's a pretty cool thing myself. So Snitch says, good Lord, another book one. Hey, I'll finish this one, okay? I will finish that one. You don't have to worry. Anitha says, I'm sure Amanda's book is amazing, but I can't think better of you. That's in our contract. Anitha, keep hating. You're my number one hater, and I appreciate you being here. I genuinely appreciate it. Yes, audiobook, please. Yeah, we got to get the we got to get the audiobook out there. Will there be a Cloth Conciliator review soon? Not a dedicated review, no. But I have talked about it in wrap-ups in previous months, if they're still up on the channel. Spoiler alert, I loved books 3 and 4 a lot. And I think book 3 was my favorite of them all. So that should help. I'm also considering rereading Book of the New Sun next year to finish out the whole Solar Sun cycle. What is it called? I can't remember the whole thing. All of Gene Wolfe's Severian books, essentially. So Daniel says, Wheat World is my favorite because I love carbs. Yes, Belltube says, Alan's channel was amazing. Yes, it was. I remember whenever he used to do BookTube, it was absolutely amazing. And I loved it. We're going to move on to the last book. And this is a book that I have been struggling to think about how I can talk about tonight. And I'm going to give my gripes with some of the discourse around this book. And that is Never Let Me Go. Nut button. I'll do another one at the end if you guys remind me. So this book is my 4th Ishiguro book. So this is not the first go around. He has things that he does in all these books, which is being extremely nebulous and sparse in details when it comes to the more mysterious or speculative aspects of his world. And I think that he does a phenomenal job of that, as always. But Never Let Me Go was a book that had to turn a corner. Actually, much like Severed Echoes in ways, except I was just along for the ride having a good time like this, Severed Echoes, and then I was like, right? Which Never Let Me Go, I was kind of like this the entire way. And then there's a turning point. However, the thing about Never Let Me Go is this book, I'm not going to tell you what it's about. It's about some kids in a boarding school. That's all. That's all you're going to hear. And here's the thing. So many people told me, don't read the blurb because it ruins the book. I respect that. And I'm actually glad I didn't. I like going to books completely blind. I think it's a much better thing to do most of the time. But everyone had kind of hyped up the twist and the reveal in this book. And I have to tell you that the reveal one, I think it's kind of like, it's not obvious for everybody, but I kind of had an idea what was going on for some part. And it is a cool reveal. I'm not arguing that. It is a cool reveal. But this book's merit does not rest upon its plot, nor the reveal or twist. I think it's more of a reveal than a twist of why these kids are special. And for me, the undercurrent of this story and what is between the words on the pages of the ideas and the thoughts and the emotions and the humanity of it all is actually what sucked me into this story. I buddy read this with Murphy and Joanna, and we had, we probably had like 3 hours of conversation about this book, and we're hoping to talk about it and Claire of the Sun because they're kind of in relation with each other. And the reason why it's a little frustrating to talk about this book in a non-spoiler fashion is because one of the biggest points about this book is when it was written and the topic that it tackles, which I can't say because it is a huge spoiler, but, oh God, I want to say it. If certain events had not happened in 2001 in America, 9/11, if 9/11 had not happened in America, there was another issue that was going to be one of the biggest debates among our society, and not just America, but the world. And this debate will come back around. And this book was written around that time and tackled it. And it tackles it in the way that Ishiguro always tackles issues, which is in a way that makes you feel very conflicted and not sure where to stand. I thought that this book being so conversational and casual in tone from Kathy, the narrator, in the first-person perspective and her recollecting events and bouncing around in the timeline and talking about her relationships and changing her mind possibly as she's telling the story was so enchanting and enriching to the experience because at the end of the story, or at the base of the story, it's all about the humanity of it and mortality. And even a little bit of free will in the idea of how much of what we are made up of makes the decision for us, or what decisions people in the past. Are we products of everything that has come before? And it has a very different meaning in this book. I'm saying as much as I can without spoilers, folks. It is Gothic in nature, Victorian Gothic. I actually was not sure about that, but the more I researched it, yeah, this book does fall into the Victorian Gothic genre. And I think that is fine to label it like this. So that was a great element of this. But also mortality is at the root of the story. And as you know, I have said that for me, and this is me, mortality and facing death is a necessity of a great piece of literature for me, for it to resonate with me, because I struggle with the idea of mortality and existential crisis and all these things. And what this story does is say that when you know your purpose or your mortality being set in stone, it informs every single part of your life. And a really good way of looking at this is when someone goes through a traumatic event and is told your lifespan has been shortened greatly. Heart attack. Maybe you have cancer. You're terminal cancer. You have 3 years to live. Whatever it is. We see that at the end of people's lives. Okay? And it informs it. But what if that happened earlier in life? It informs every aspect of who you are, how you interact with somebody, all the way down to your friendships, your relationships, not just romantic only, but also your sexual relationships, your communication and what you bring up, what you fight for, what hill you stand on, what you are willing to like cognitively accept as fact or information more about your situation. And I know that sounds a little like what? But if you read the book, I think you'll have some idea maybe of what I'm getting at. But I think the idea of mortality affects us all deeply in how we look at it. And we can all come from different backgrounds of belief of what happens once we're dead, or what lack of. But in some way, the knowledge that one day we will all, that's the one thing we all share. If you're watching this right now, like we share the fact that we both will have to face those moments. And that, I think, subconsciously affects literally every single thing we do. This book does a phenomenal job of looking at that through a really interesting POV that it's an issue that is going to be a thing. So I just, the fact that it's topical, the fact that it's topical, but also has all this humanity at it and this basic stuff, it just, for me, was a magical experience. It is not my favorite Ishiguro book. I actually like Claire and the Sun more than this book because I think Claire and the Sun's speculative elements and the world building that's left unsaid to speculate on was just so fun, but in many ways is also in relation to this book, and then some ways not. Murphy wasn't as high on this book. I think she said that she enjoyed the conversation about this book so much. That's what she got out of it. Whereas Claire and the Sun, she enjoyed the conversation and she was enjoying what was going on. Never Let Me Go is not a book to read if you're like driven by plot or you just want to what happens next. I don't think it's going to be satisfying. And I know there's going to be people in the chat because I've seen it many times when I've mentioned this book. People are always, very upfront. Oh, I hated it. I hated it. Or I loved it. I could see why people would dislike this. But for me, so Murphy didn't get as much out of this because only the conversation piece. But for me, that conversation piece is what I want out of books. And not just conversation with other people, but with myself. And when a book makes me reflect on moments in my life, it definitely goes up a notch for me. I don't necessarily need the plot to be all that interesting. And maybe the plot isn't interesting to most people. I don't know. It's a non-factor for me at this point. Never Let Me Go had a character named Ruth, and I know somebody just like Ruth, and Ruth is infuriating. And Ruth, I can say this is a non-consequential spoiler. Ruth is the type of person that walks around and you're reading a book and tells you the ending of the book before you get there. Everyone just booed and groaned at their computer right now. I can feel it, and you're justifiably so. But Ruth also has reasons why that she is like this. And there's other aspects of Ruth that are very complex. And there's fear at the root of Ruth and her lying issues. And I think I know someone very similar to Ruth. And it made me think about that person, or at least aspects of that person, and wonder, maybe possibly, have I overlooked an opportunity to extend them grace? So it made me very self-reflective. And I know that I'm talking about a lot of things that are personally impactful for me, but that's kind of what this is. This is not an objective review. If you hated this book, I don't mind. I think that's fine. But the small tragedies and the ships that sail are at the core of my thoughts all the time. And this book has that. And did it in a way that I thought was just really immaculate. So I love this book. I think it's tied in last place with Ishiguro books, which should tell you how much I love Ishiguro. I've said to some people, some recency bias, maybe. I think he's like a top 2 author now. Like I love this guy. So this book made me choke up. It made me tear up. I'm getting like a tightness in my chest talking about it because it meant so much. But it is not the most entertaining book. I think that the twist and reveal is a little overblown. Like, I think if you're reading it for that, you're probably going to be disappointed. Maybe you won't be, but like, I would not want this book to be recommended just on the merits of its plot or plot twist, even though it's more of a reveal. So that's all I can say about it without too many spoilers. I have to keep it vague, but this is a book I would much rather talk about with spoilers because of the actual issue, social issue that's at the core of this book that we can't really talk about. So that's it. Ishiguro, overwhelmingly positive. Like I said, nut button for old Ishiguro. I know he's won, the Nobel Prize in Literature, but that is much more of a well worth award for him, I think. I think he would love that. So someone said, another pretentious book in Alan's words. Well, that's funny because Alan loved Remains of the Day, which was by Ishiguro. So that is null and void, canceled out. I'm sorry, Anitha. You are wrong. It might be a little bit. I'm sure. I'm trying to get to, there's so many chats. I know this is a book that a lot of people, this is on the New York Times, like top 100, and it's a very hyped book. I think Remains of the Day is his best book still by far. Like, it is way above the other ones for me, but also maybe even a little bit harder to recommend than this one possibly. So, Bep says, I didn't like it. Runs for cover. Totally understand. I get it. There's nothing wrong with that. Meowcat said, I just finished reading this book for the 4th time and it touches me so deeply. But will Alan like it? No, there's too much sex in it for Alan. He would not like that. I think he would struggle with it. Man, there's so much I want to say about this book, and it's all spoilers. It drives me mad because there's such a frustrating, like heartbreaking moment at the end, and I just want to like, is this the best we can do? Like, is this the best we can do? Really? Man. Books of Genghis Khan said, like this movie when it came out with some great performances, but wish I could have read it first not to spoil it. Yeah, I've heard the movie's really good, and I probably will read this, but it depends. Meowcat said, this book is like an onion. It has so many layers, but the core of this book is the importance of empathy. Yeah, I would agree with that. And grace. Yeah, I would agree with that. And also, I think that this is typical Ishiguro. Like, you could read it and be like, meh, boring. There wasn't a lot to it. I got the twist. Big deal. But like with Ishiguro books, you know, I read them very slowly. The read along, we did 2 chapters a day. And I think this one I probably could have read a little bit quicker, actually. But I have found sitting with the chapters, you know, just a couple chapters at a time over days and reading it over like 3-4 weeks has been such a way more rewarding experience because Ishiguro is writing, he's writing words, but there's stuff that he's not writing that's almost just as important, you know. I think of Gene Wolfe when I think of things like that. Adam K said, I was spoiled, but I do think it affected my enjoyment somewhat, but I still thought it was really good. See, Joanna was also spoiled, and she said it didn't bother her at all. So I guess it just depends on how much that matters, you know. Bell2 says, in absence of Alan, of course you buddy read it with Joanna. Christina! Beb says, if you like Never Let Me Go, Grey House is perfect for you, so you can enjoy another pretentious book about kids. LOL, both are objectively 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, but ugh. Well, there's no such thing as an objective 9 or 10 out of 10. Even though I love this book and you don't. I don't think my opinion's better or worth more than yours. Your experience is your experience, and that's totally cool. I think I own Grey House, by the way. Comrade Nerd said, I read this way back in 2015, and it blew me away. Very, very cool. Very, very cool. Kale said that I could guess at the issue. They Googled it, they looked it up, and they were right. Yes, if you were alive during that time, I was young, but I do remember it, and it was a massive issue, and it's going to still end up being a massive issue. Interesting. Comrade Nerd says it actually led to me reading Peril of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Fascinating. Huh. We are all coconuts, people. Ishiguro concurs. That's really, really fun. T. Baggins says, what comes before determines what comes after. Yes, a little R. Scott Baker in there for sure. Bart, what's up, man? Another Ishiguro enjoyer said, never let go while gripping kept me at a distance in a way that Clara and the Sun did not. I would agree with you. I think the distance in Clara and the Sun came from the fact that we were in the eyes of an AF or an artificial friend. And I agree, Bart, that I ended up liking Clara. I think Clara cover to cover the whole time I was into it, whereas Never Let Me Go cover to cover is so much better after the book. And it's hard to balance those two experiences, but I did like Clara and the Sun a little bit more than Never Let Me Go. I think Never Let Me Go and Pale View of Hills for me are like kind of on the same level in some ways. Beth says, Jimmy is making good points and forced me to change my mind. Crap. No. You know, hey, read it again. Who knows? I have a friend who read Remains of the Day, DNF'd it, and now has come back to it whenever he kept thinking about it, and now he's loving it. So, you know, maybe it's a mood thing, or maybe it's not for you. Like, that's fine. It's cool. Oh, you like Clara and the Sun, Beps. So you didn't like Never Let Me Go be like Clara and the Sun. That's interesting. I like that. Yolk said, putting this one in the cart right now. I always suggest to try a sample. You get a free sample on Kindle, on eCloud Reader. You don't even have to have a Kindle or anything. You can just get a free sample from Google Books even. Always recommend that. So Hayward said, stealing myself for the inevitable Patreon pick loss. It is coming up. The Patreon pick is coming up. So brace yourself, please. Ruth and Kathy were such a great contest. Yes, I would agree. Joanna says, hooray for the overwhelmingly positive take. I couldn't agree with you more. Everything you shared here. Now I can skip my wrap up. Joanna, sometimes I wish I could just take the messages that we have sent back and forth about this, and Murphy as well, and just play that in my wrap up, because I think sometimes I'm way more elegant whenever I'm in the moment, which is part of the live stream appeal, obviously. But you do lose a little bit of that after you've sat on the book for like a week, you know. Shot said, you got to enjoy the journey, Jimmy. I did. And the journey looking back on it is even better, which I love. Like people who decide to read the last page of a book before deciding, yes. Yes. Bep says Ruth is the problem. That was a perfect summary of her. Oh my gosh. She shown as still a human being who we should empathize with, which was good. Yeah. Yeah. Tom says, damn, that ship sail hits pretty hard. Oh, you have no idea. You read the book and that has a whole nother meaning. And it's tough. T-Baggin says, top 2, sharing space with whom? So if Ishiguro is in fact in second place, George R. R. Martin would still be my favorite author. So the tightness in my chest could have been indigestion. That is actually true. Indigestion as I look at a putrid sunrise. Yes. If Jimmy does a top 10 author list for the Fantasy Network, George and Tad will be the only authors known for fantasy left. That's not true. That's not true. There's some other amazing authors on that list as well. Also, amount of books I read. I'm wanting to do those lists, but I have to come up with a way of picking them first and then pick between my favorites, which hurts a lot. Top 10 of the year for Never Let Me Go. So I usually only do one book by an author a year, and Remains of the Day would be making the top 10 list, not Never Let Me Go, because I liked Remains of the Day more. I actually forgot I read that this year. That was like really early on in the year, and it is still at the top. So Snitch says, Murphy just started her own live stream. Do you, like Michael Jordan, take that personally? No, I don't, because I don't think me and Murphy share too much of a knot. I mean, we do, but like, it's not, like, I'm not competing with Murphy. Let's be honest. We are doing very different things. I don't think that it ruins it for either of us. Plus, 99% of the views come afterwards. So now, if it was someone more close, maybe I would. Who knows? Yeah. So Joanna says she was spoiled for Never Let Me Go, but it did not detract from this experience at all, which was really cool. And Annette said the same thing. I was spoiled. It's still one of my favorite books. Yeah, I don't know if the spoiling matters, as much with this one. Beesney says, where do I begin my Ishiguro journey? So first off, if you like Downton Abbey, Remains of the Day. That I've never watched that show. I don't know anything about it, to be honest with you. I just know that that's like what people say, and Alan confirmed it, and I believe him. I really liked Clara in the Sun. Never Let Me Go. I mean, I think most Ishiguro fans would tell you Never Let Me Go is where to start. I also think that Pale View of Hills, if you're just going for like vibes, like all of his books plots are very nebulous. Like they're not plot driven books at all. Pale View of Hills was really psychological and I really enjoyed it. Actually a little bit creepy, in fact. So you probably couldn't go wrong with any of them, unless if you're a Downton Abbey fan, you really like English stuff and English humor, then like Remains of the Day is a surefire win. Well, I shouldn't say surefire win, but a surefire recommendation for you to try. But Never Let Me Go would probably work. Though I do like Clara in the Sun a little bit more. It just depends. Clara in the Sun is interesting because it's very topical to today. We have they're like automated artificial friends. So it kind of is talking about like the idea of like, an artificial being and how we treat them in society, especially when they become way more capable. And also goes into all the things like mortality and sickness and a lot of cool stuff. So I don't know. I really like Clara in the Sun. It is way more contentious among his diehard fans, maybe the more literary crowd, but I thought it was excellent. Jimmy, you will love Grey House. I can't wait to roll my eyes, but still be happy for you. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Mrs. Nuts has been rolling her eyes at me for so many years. Oh, my goodness. Top 10 authors you won't believe who's number 3, Philly Chase. Did you guys hear Philip is he's writing some stuff outside of Adan. He's going to go by Philly Chase, and he's going to be writing urban romance. It's going to be sick. It's going to be great. Snitch says, when are you doing When We Are Orphans? I consider it the worst book I've ever completed, beating out Return of the Crimson Guard. So I have heard that this is unanimously considered the worst Ishiguro book. So I might save it for last, or maybe I should get it out of the way. I don't know. It's a good question. The Unconsoled, is that what the one? That's the one I'm most excited for, actually, because of you, Mitch. I really need to prioritize getting to Ishiguro. If you like very slow, thought-provoking books, reading between the lines, I think it'd be good. B says, on it, boss. Clara in the Sun and Remains of the Day in the cart. Please like it. If you don't, I will buy you 2 other books that to replace them. That's my promise for you. Also, shout out to Bee's Knees. I know you guys have seen like the new banners and like the new icons and stuff. Bee's Knees is the wonderfully talented artist that actually made all that come true. So big shout out to Bee's Knees, one of the more talented talented artists that I've worked with, and was a pleasure. So I am so thankful for the art and the talent that Bees was able to provide. Comrade Nerd says, the guy who directed Never Let Me Go also directed 1 Hour Photo, a psychological thriller starring Robin Williams and one of his few non-comedic roles. I've never even heard of this, and I love Robin Williams. Interesting. Garrick says, nothing is worse than Return of the Crimson Guard. It's not possible. That book is by 9/11. That's a bold statement, my man. That's a bold statement. Amanda is reading The Unconsoled now. Oh, I'm terrified. Because if you hate it, I'll be sad. Because what if I love it then? Then we can't be friends anymore. Like, there's no friendship if you can't agree on books, right? I hope you love it. The nice thing about Ishiguro, though, is whether you love it or hate it, his books are all pretty damn short, which is great. B says, thanks, boss. Hopefully I get some water in the art basement eventually, though. Hey, I think you're the GOAT. Rogue said, Return of the Crimson Guard was not bad. I've read far worse stuff than that. I would like to see what you've been reading, Rogue. My God. Also, to point out 200-page books, I think next year, and I know that I said last time, I'm going to read one book at a time, and I lied, so maybe this is a lie. But I think next year, maybe what I'll be trying to do is prioritize finishing some of my series that I really want to finish. And as I'm finishing those, surrounding them with 200, 300-page standalones, whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, or literary fiction, doesn't really matter to me. But I'm going to be reading a lot of 200-page books. I asked for a recommendation in my Patreon Discord for 200-page books, and I went and bought like 20 books. So I'm stocked up next year on like short books to get through, which is going to be really great. But I'm actually going to be finishing some series, believe it or not, which I've been doing a little bit more of. I don't get enough credit. I'm not getting enough credit around here. I'm just saying. I know I have a problem starting series, but come on. Come on now. All right. Enough with this nonsense. Let's spin the raffle and draw my pick. Now, if you win, people are going to think that I've fixed this thing. Do you guys want to do the Patreon pick? Put a bingo ball in the chat if you're ready for the Patreon pick of the month. Let's find out what I have to read. I don't even know if there's a bingo ball in the emojis. If Mish wins, I will unsub. You can join the droves of other people that unsub once I announced I was doing lives only. Also, for those thinking about copying me, don't, if you care about growth. I promise. You do not want to see all those red marks on YouTube when it reminds you that you're failing at being a YouTuber, though I don't really mind that much. You got to do what you got to do. You know, you got to do what you feel is the right thing to do for yourself creatively. Okay, anyways, Patreon pick of the pick time. Now, last time I was informed that the spinning of the balls, it kind of keeps them sucked in because there's so many balls. There's almost 100 balls in here now that, you know, maybe it wasn't mixed up enough. And then Namos won again and people were like, oh, it's rigged, you know, recount, whatever. I'm going to spin this bad boy up. I'm going to reverse it, and then I'm going to mess it up with my hands, and then I'm going to draw a pick, okay? So let's get it going. Bookish found. I think that's a soccer ball, but honestly, I'm going to take that as a bingo ball. That's the best we got, guys, okay? There's footballs in the chat. I love it. I love it. Okay, let's do it. Can we get a drum roll? Do we have a drum roll? Don't I have a drum roll? I don't know if I have a drum roll. No, I don't have a drum ball. I have an air horn, though. How about that? This will work. This is a drum roll. All right, here we go, folks. Okay. All right, the Patreon pick. By the way, shout out to all the patrons. I know I don't have like the patron slide on here anymore. Like at the end, like I want to thank all my patrons. You know, I don't have that, but thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you've ever done it, we have to find a new raffler that's bigger, or I need to buy like an automated bingo machine. And I'm trying to shake these up. You know what? I'm going to shake it up some more. Okay. From your angle, it looks like they're getting stuck to the side, and they are technically, but the middle of it does get jumbled up. So The winner of the November 2024 Patreon pick of the month is number 38. And I don't know who it is because I don't have the slide up. So first off, let me show it to you. Number 38. So, you know, I'm not teasing. It's not going to focus, but it's 38. There it is, 38. 38, and that is Chris, We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. Mike Shackle, the Mike Shackle. We Are the Dead. You know I love mortality in my books. Guys, we got to quit putting book ones on the Patreon. I literally just said that I was going to start finish the series, and you guys got me reading another book one in a fantasy series. This man is serious about the integrity of his ball. You're damn right. You're damn right. All right, We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. Is that a trilogy or 4 books? Is that a trilogy or 4 books? Someone tell me in the chat. Congratulations, Chris, by the way. I've heard the book is great. I know that I know it's another book one. I'm aware, everyone. Okay. Booker said, oops, I'm sorry. I'm old and forgot I'm not supposed to use the thumbs up emoji. I didn't get that memo because I use the thumbs up emoji all the time. B says, who the F is that? And everyone is laughing that it's a book one. I swear to God. It's a trilogy. It's just a trilogy. Okay, just 3 books added to the TBR. Okay, fantastic. Oh my goodness. Doug says, if you only ever read book ones, you never have to learn how to count. My man, this is why I dropped out of my physics degree, because I can't count. It's like you should put parameters on the Patreon picks. There are parameters. There are very few, but there are some parameters. No nonfiction, no rereads. And I think that's about it. I opened it up to all fiction at some point. But honestly, I'm pretty excited about this because it did get a lot of hype. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not addicted. Capricious Fox says I'm addicted to book ones. You're all force feeding me these book ones. I don't even want it anymore. It's a dog and pony show over here. This is ridiculous. Now, I'm not upset about this because this is a book that I've seen a lot of hype for. It sounds like something I'd probably enjoy. However, isn't this one of these series that has like a very contentious ending and people don't like book 3? Isn't this one of the many fantasy series that has like a disappointing ending? I feel like that's the general consensus I saw, but obviously that's in my own echo chamber, so I'm not sure. Got him by the balls. You sure do. Oh, there's broken binding editions. I'm going to be sad I don't have it if I like it. T. Baggins says, I really don't think you'll like this one. Benjamin's going to read it with me. Hey, if you're going to read it with me, let me know in chat. So one cool thing about doing these live, folks, is the fact that it is a conversation. And like I'm essentially doing reviews, which is crazy. I've filled up about 2 hours talking about 6 books. But if it does kind of have some sort of like motivation for you to read the books that I'm reading, if it's a Patreon pick or not, and the other books I'll mention that I'm going to mention here in a second, because you kind of get to discuss them with me live. So that's like another really cool thing about this that I like. Like if 5 people in the chat read the book, they can balance out my bad takes with their own, right? So I think that's fine. Oh no, Daniel says, I think the 3rd book is substantially longer than the first 2. Hate to see that. We hate to see that. The first step is admitting you have Jimmy's victim blame. How are you a victim of me reading book ones? Get out of here. Get out of here. Jimmy, let's talk numbers. Everyone's got a price. This pick cannot stand. All right. If you can get me a Misha Merlin Game of Thrones, I will switch my pick to whatever you want, Mitch. If you can provide me one of those. You did send me a really cool edition of a book once, actually. So I do appreciate you for that. But a Misha Merlin Game of Thrones, that is my price. It's grimdark, so yeah. I mean, I like dark books. Rogue asks, why aren't we allowed to use the thumbs up emoji? I don't know. I still use it. I'm a boomer, though. I don't know. It's all good, right? Jimmy is Gluttony from 7, but with book ones instead of SpaghettiOs. That is such a specific movie reference, and I love the movie 7. What a fantastic... What an absolute fantastic reference. Samwise said, I'd love to be a patron and force Jimmy to read some good old Tom Clancy. Yeah, you and every other dude over the age of 50 would probably love for me to read Tom Clancy. I played the games. Does that count? I don't know. I don't think he has much to do with it. Mitch with a super chat. I hate the way it does the super chat on here. It says redraw for 14. Damn it. Dude, why did you do that? Don't do that. Thank you, but don't do that. Because now I do feel like I need to redraw. That's not cool. That's not cool. Oh my goodness. Daniel says, I think there's a little bit of a phenomenon on BookTube where some people are basically only ever reading book ones, flitting from series to series, so they never get left out of any hype. Well, for me, honestly, it's more of a matter of time, but genuinely, I think like 80% of the series that I've started have been from the Patreon picks. So like damned if you do and damned if you don't kind of thing. Right. But I don't mind, I will prioritize the series that I want to finish. Like for instance, I'm picking back up the Books of Amber. I'm reading book 4 and I'm going to finish that first arc. I'm not as interested in books 6 through 10. I'll probably read them, but like I am very interested in finishing the first arc of Amber. And, the good stuff will rise to the top and I'll finish it. If it's great, it'll call to me. I'm still thinking about Ken Scholl's Psalms of Isaac series, Lamentations book 1. I'm still thinking about it. So that's a series that will definitely be high up on the list. And then of course, Black Company by Glenn Cook. Hey, we should pull another pick. Donation gold or reroll. See, here's the problem though. I would love to do that. But if I do it, someone else is going to super chat. And then like, we're going to have 4 or 5 books and I will feel horrible if I don't do it. And then I'm going to have like this month's, I have the Tad book, which is 1 million pages long. And I have other books I have to read. So I can't believe you did that, Mitch. That is so ridiculous. They're only Canadian dollars. So that's like $1.50. Chris isn't here. Redraw and cut the VOD. One more pick. Dude, I'm old, but not an old man, Jimmy. I reread The Hunt for Red October less than a month ago. All right. I'm sorry, Derry. All people over 50 love Tom Clancy. My mistake. I am reading Scholl's. I love Lamentations. It was so good. I'm 100% doing it. And yes, I am a huge Chronicles of Amber fan. I think Zelazny's the dude. He's so good. All right, seriously. And this isn't like one of those like Twitch streamer things where I'm like, say, oh, please don't do it. Like, because I want you to. I'm being like, I can't disable super chats during this live stream, but I'm going to draw one more book. But this cannot keep happening. And 2, do not, I'm being serious. Like, this is not a joke. Do not super chat anymore. And for a redraw, because I will feel horrible because I'm not going to be able to do it. I cannot commit to more than 2 books. So I will do one more drawing. No, I'm not too, I sincerely, like I will not find it pleasurable or funny. Please do not send in a donation for more books. Okay. Thank you. But I'll do one more. It is my birthday month, by the way. So this one's for my birthday. Mitch, thank you for the 14 spot in Canadian, which comes out to $7.50 or about $3.50, I think. So Mitch has been trolling me for about 3.5 years, and this is the biggest troll of them all. All right. Also, Bookish, I saw that you had to leave. If you watch the rest of this, I hope you're doing well, man. All right, and the pick is number 84, as you can see. Everyone sees, okay, 84. And number 84 is... Oh, no, it's Curran G, but Curran has not updated his pick. I've already read Kushil's Dart. So we got to redraw. Now, Curran, if you're watching this after the fact and you're like, hey, I got picked, I should still get a book. PM me and I'll get the book from you. I might have to read it at the end of the month into December. And I also would beg you to choose a short book, but you had not actually updated the pick. And if you did and I forgot to update it, that's on me. So now I'm potentially going for 3 books. No, what are we doing? Benjamin, super chat for 15 says, this is to not redraw anymore. This is not the effect I wanted to have. God damn. Ben, Thank you. It's far too kind. It's far too kind. You know what? Maybe live streams are a bad idea. Number 65, which won't be the retirement age by the time I get there because the world is going to make me work till I'm 70. 65 is Connor B. Dungeon Crawler Carl. And that is a great pick because I have actually read the first like 30% of Dungeon Crawler Carl. I put it on the back burner. It was a soft DNF. Like I'll get to it later. By the way, congratulations, Connor. So this will make me finish it, and that actually isn't as bad because I've actually read some of it. I wasn't planning on finishing it this year. I was like, I would have to be in a very specific mood to do Dungeon Crawler Carl. So it was my out time, but I'm a man of the people. I got to serve them. But that is it. I will not redraw no matter what at this point. So Dungeon Crawler Carl, I'll chime in while everyone else chimes in. And the fact that I already did like, I think 25 or 30% of it is actually a good thing. And it is another book one. Garrick says, can you find my ball in there? I don't believe it is. I actually took it out. Specifically your ball. I took it out. I think your pick is fourth wing or something, isn't it? Ridiculous. Tanner is stoked for that. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I will be finishing Dungeon Crawler Carl that I soft DNF'd at some point. By the way, I need to say this because I know it's super popular. People are going to comment and tell me I'm bad or dumb. It's not that I didn't like Dungeon Crawler Carl. I wasn't necessarily in the mood, and I had other things I had to read, so I got put on the back shelf, and I was like, I'll make it a priority in 2025. This is just going to make it so Tanner will love this. So I will have to finish Dungeon Crawler Carl. And then the other book is We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle. I'm very excited about that. I mean, I've heard good things. I hope I love it. There is a lot of people who enjoy Mike Shackle, so I think it'll be great. And we do indeed own Fourth Wing. And Ben, sincerely though, thank you for the 15 spot. That was super kind of you. That might even buy me 2 whiskeys at a cheaper restaurant here. So I will have 2 whiskeys in your honor, and think about Neo 2 that we've played together. So Dungeon Crawler Carl, We Are the Dead. I mean, if anything, at least it's forcing me to read some popular books, right? And not just some of this boring J.G. Ballard, Litfic, Ishiguro garbage, right? Am I right? It'll be stuff that people are hyped about. I'm going to go ahead and hold on. Also, I want to invite anybody. Hey, read Dungeon Crawler Carl with me and We Are the Dead, and bring your opinions to the live chat next month. I would love that. I think it'd be great. Comrade Nerd said, I tried audiobook Dungeon Crawler Carl, but the narrators sound like an out of breath Patrick Warburton. Oh, that is too good. So other books I'm reading, and I'm actually kind of excited. So obviously book 4 of Books of Amber, which I think it's Hand of Oberyn. I'm going to be finishing that. Super short book. I'm also going to finish, and I'll finish it tonight, which is Will and Testament by I can't remember her name. She's from Norway. She's Norwegian. It's Vigdis something. And Will and Testament has a really fascinating backstory that'll probably take me like a whole bunch of time next wrap up to talk about. But very, very, very good book with a lot of controversy around it that I can't wait to talk about. And so I'll cover that next month. I'm also reading The Other Valley by like Scott somebody. Dude, I need to look up author names. The Other Valley. And this came as a recommendation from Talking Story, John at Talking Story, and his wife. His wife actually said that it reminded her a little bit of David Mitchell, where he gets put in the literary fiction category, but he should actually be in the sci-fi speculative fiction section. So The Other Valley, to give you an idea of the premise of the story, is there's 3 towns, and they're all on a line. The middle town is the one we're in, and the town to the left is 20 years in the past. Same town, but 20 years in the past, and the town on the right is 20 years in the future. Crazy. And there's a fence, and you can't visit each other unless if you get permission from the governing body. So there's like rules and lore around like people who jump the fence and stuff. So you guys know I love a contained environment thing like that. So that's an obvious home run. So I will definitely be doing that. I'm trying to see. people really want the fourth wing Jimmy Kelsey discussion. Jimmy and Kelsey will be discussing Game of Thrones because she finished it, and me and her have to talk about it. So I'm hoping to maybe do that next week. We will probably be doing a Game of Thrones chat. We'll probably do maybe a section of it non-spoiler and then talk spoilers. I mean, it's Game of Thrones. Most people have read it, so I'm not too concerned with keeping it spoiler-free for very long. That is going to probably take place of Chatting with Nuts next week. And Chatting with Nuts will be back on the 15th. Not next Friday, but the Friday after. So, but next week there will still be a stream. It'll be me and Mrs. Nuts talking about Game of Thrones. So that'll be really exciting because I've been waiting 10 years for her to read that book. And it'll be a lot of fun to see her fresh reactions, without any influence from the internet, which is kind of crazy with a series like that. So that'll be cool. Other books I'm reading, very slowly going through Solenoid, but I think that's going to be like a 6-month read. I don't think that that's going to be done by the end of next month. Obviously, I'm going to be reading book 4, Navigator's Children. I'm finishing Ostenard. Insane, dude. Like I'm eating so good, dude. Between that and then Wind and Truth coming out in December, like I'm just a happy man. It's cool to be excited about a book going at a bookstore, like that's going to be sick. And Mrs. Nuts said, I sure did. You finally read it. I'm so happy. Better late than never. That's right, Meow Cat. That's right. Mrs. Nuts is going to be on the channel a lot more. She's also read a couple other books. We went and saw StoryTube over in Ireland, and they gifted us a lot of books. That was our parting gift from Ireland, is that StoryTube actually picked out books they thought me and Kelsey would love, which is still one of my favorite things anyone's ever done for me. And Will and Testament was one of the books, which I'm about to finish. And then there was a book, I can't remember the name of it. Kelsey put it in chat, but she finished a book that Carlos and Yolanda had given us, and she loved it. So I'm hoping maybe to bring them on and do like a double date live stream where we talk about the books that they gave us as gifts, because it was incredibly sweet. And also I just kind of want to hang out with Carlos and Yolanda more. And yeah, Solenoid. Yep. Yeah. I'm reading it very slowly, like a chapter every few days. I'm just taking my time with it. I know that I don't have to worry about the plot connection and all this stuff. It's more just an experience of stream of consciousness type thing. So, which will be really, really great. I'm trying to think of something else. There's another, I'm reading Wolf Hall. I'm like almost halfway through Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, and I have so much to say about it. I really, 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 really love it. That book was okay-ish for the first 100 pages, and I was like not sure if I was super into it. And then it just blew my socks off. And now I'm really, it's like an acquired taste. And then once it hit, man, I loved it. I loved it. So I'm about halfway through that. I hope I should finish that this month. I don't see why I wouldn't. It would be strange if I didn't. And then outside of that, I think that's it. Will and Testament, The Other Valley, Tad's book, Dungeon Crawler Carl, We Are the Dead. God, this is like 8 books, guys. So actually, Wolf Hall, I'm reading slowly. So actually, Wolf Hall probably won't be finished. It could be finished in November. We're not sure. That's not a book I'm going to rush to finish because I'm just savoring it. So We Are the Dead, Dungeon Crawler Carl, Other Valley, 4th Book of Amber, and Will and Testament will definitely be on there. And Curran, if you're watching this afterwards, talk to me and we'll get your pick figured out, which can be a 3rd pick, which will probably have to go into December if I had to guess. So it's something else. It's something else. And also the book that Kelsey read that she loved is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And Ben loves it. I've heard it. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm actually going to read that book as well. But Kelsey's going to be coming in and joining these wrap-ups when she's finishing up books, and we'll do some streams together. So you'll be seeing a little bit more of Mrs. Nuts. She absolutely loved that book. Derry says, wait, I wanted Wolf Hall. What's this Wolf Hall business? Yes, I have been bullied into pronouncing things correctly, which is very upsetting, to be honest. Let me know. Just message me, BellTube. We can link up on We Are the Dead, and we can even maybe pick out a pace to do it at, because I like doing that when I buddy read with people. Waldo said, did he say the Old Testament? No. Will in Testament. It's a Norwegian translated book about a dysfunctional family with a history of abuse and neglect. And it's very heavy. It was actually pitched to me as, like, if you didn't like Little Life, but you'd like something that explores it in a more tasteful manner, check out Will and Testament. I think it's probably not a good comparison. I don't think we should compare the two books necessarily, but it's very dark like A Little Life, and I think maybe handled with more care from the victim's POV. So it's something if you're looking for another book like that, which I don't know why, you can read Will and Testament like me. But it has been a very emotional read so far, and I'll have more thoughts about it next time. So I do read the Old Testament though, even though I'm not religious. I read Genesis and Judges and all those things. For reasons. All right, so that is going to take us to the end here of In a Nutshell live for the second time. I really thought that we would be about an hour and a half, and it turns out it was over 2 hours. And I don't know if I took many breaks talking, so I'm saying cheers to my vocal cords and my dry mouth. I don't want to talk for another 24 hours after this, I don't think. I so much appreciate you guys spending your Friday night with me, as always. I know this isn't a Chatting with Nuts, and I know it can be long-winded, but I'm going to put the timestamps down below, so if you missed anything of it, you can jump to a certain book. It's going to be very helpful for you after the fact, which is great. And I just genuinely hope that you had a ridiculously good October. And if you didn't, I hope that you keep your chin up and understand that November has good things waiting for you, and that time will pass and it'll be good. But I hope it was good for all of you. And I just hope that we can go into holiday season and everything in the crazy world and kind of get into our books and find ways to connect with one another. So thank you for being here. I love you. Hit like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Patreon's description is optional, but always appreciated. Until I see you next time, guys, be good, be safe, and remember to always... I went to hit the nut button and I had it off. That was such a good bit. I was waiting all night to do that. Well, until I see you next time, be good, be safe. Remember to always keep turning the page.